Hi, I'm Claire Thorne. I work with Central State University's Extension Program, and today we're in the Seed to Bloom Botanical and Community Garden, and we're going to talk about flower anatomy. Flower anatomy is simply the parts that make the flower. The petals, the stem, the sepals, and such. Okay, but there's no better way to learn the flower parts other than by dissecting a flower. So I have some samples here that we're going to take a look at, and we'll begin to pull them apart. First, I want to show you the actual sepals that protect the flower bud while it is forming. Okay? Once the flower begins to blossom, the sepals, in the case of the lily, form petal-like structures. So we're going to take these sepals apart, and I have an actual sheet that we will take apart. So in this case of the lily, it has 3 sepals. And what remains are the actual petals. So we're going to remove those petals. And for the sake of education, we do sacrifice some of our flowers here in the garden. But please don't do this at home without asking your mom or dad or whoever takes care of the flowers. Let them know that you're doing a dissection so you can learn more about the flower parts. So here we have sepals, and then we have the petals. Like I said, the sepals in this case look very similar to the petals. So all flowers will either have male parts or female parts. So we're going to start with the male parts, and those are called stamens. I'm just going to add these down to the chart. So these are the stamens. I'm going to put the female part down for a second so I can explain. The male part has this pollen-covered anther, so that when insects or birds come to land to take the nectar from the flower, they get covered in this pollen. Those insects then carry that pollen and or touch the female part. So this part here is what we call the pistil. At the very top is the stigma, and when an insect touches that stigma with that pollen, that will begin the fertilization process. And it will travel down this tube to the ovary. And that's simply where the eggs form. Now I have an example, and I'm going to put this right here. There's your pistil, your ovary, your style, and the very end is the stigma. And each flower may have its own look to the flower parts. So this is pretty much a lily, and they all have a standard look to their structures. Unlike hibiscus, it has a very unique structure. So you still have the sepals, those happen to be green on this flower. We have our petals, and the petals really serve as a landing pad to attract the birds or the bees into where the nectar is held. These little yellow fuzzy looking things, those again are the male parts. The pollen is yellow, and I didn't mention this before, but the very thin little tubes, those are called filaments. Okay? And at the very top of the hibiscus, there are several stigmas, so that when this pollen gets touched onto those stigmas, it will fertilize and travel down the style to the ovary, which is down here. So I just want to show you that in the case, we're going to switch back to the lily. Once the lily, we call it expires or wilts, it will then start producing the seeds. And right now they're pretty immature. But that would be pretty much an immature seed. A little bit later, it will form this pod. And this is the ovary from the same lily growing on the plant. And if we dissect it, we cut it, then inside are those seeds. So before you go again and explore in your gardens at home, get permission. But this is one of the fascinating things about how plants make seeds. And the reason they make seeds is to carry on for future years with production. This is so important when it comes to our food. We can't live without pollination by the insects. So I'm going to take this hibiscus flower that has wilted, and we'll see if there's any seed formation starting. So I'm taking off the petals, and what I'm left with are the male and female parts of the flower. And I just got covered a little bit in pollen on my skin. So the male parts are covered in yellow pollen with the little thread-like filaments. And when that pollen touches the female part, the stigma, it will travel down through the style, which is this tube. It includes the ovary. And this again is the whole female part. And we'll see if there's any magic happening here. And not quite yet. Well, actually, I'll take that back. Here are some teeny tiny little seeds. You almost need to have a magnifier to see them. Okay. Well, I hope you have enjoyed learning about flower anatomy and the various parts that make the flower. And hopefully you understand the idea of pollination, how the insects will come and land on the stigmas, get covered in pollen, they'll go for the nectar and touch the stigma to produce seeds. Come back another time and we'll see what we do here in the garden at Central State.